Final Fantasy VII sucks. Now that I've officially pissed off everybody, let me get a little bit more in depth of what I'm going to be talking about today. And I know that probably with the title and me just outright saying that Final Fantasy VII sucks is going to piss off some people, possibly. Let me clarify a bit. The reason why I'm saying that Final Fantasy VII sucks comes from a very interesting place. Now, here's the thing. As I've mentioned before, Final Fantasy VII is a very important game to me. I've loved the game for many, many decades. Pretty much since the game first came out. Well, not since the first game came out, because I played 8 before I played 7. But once I originally found out about 7, which was not long after I played 8, I fell in love with the game. It has always been something very near and dear to my heart. Now, when I say that Final Fantasy VII sucks, I'm not referring to the base game. The original game is a serviceable game. It's dated as all get out, and far from perfect. But it's still a fun game, and still an enjoyable game. What I'm referring to is what Square Enix has done to Final Fantasy VII. Now, everybody knows that out of all the Final Fantasy games, all of them, out of the whole wide array of games, Final Fantasy VII is regarded to be the best. Final Fantasy VII is regarded as the most popular out of the franchise. And that's true. No one can deny that. Much like other franchises, the most popular games in a series, or the most popular characters or series, are always going to get more love and attention, and will create more spin-offs and more sequels, or more content involving those characters, or that series. Now, as probably some of you are aware, that's normally not a bad thing, because normally more of a game series or of something that you really love is a good thing. I mean, I love things like Kamen Rider and Super Sentai, Power Rangers. These are long-running franchises that have been around for over 20 some odd years. I love the Gundam franchise. That's over 40 years old. You get the point. Sometimes that's okay. Certainly, at some point, you're going to get shows or games or whatever the case may be that are a little bit below bar. Maybe the franchise has kind of lost its mojo in some instances and kind of peters downhill before it, rises like a phoenix out of the ashes. That does tend to happen sometimes. And Final Fantasy VII is Square Enix's most popular title. No matter what your favorite in the series is, I know a lot of people praise Final Fantasy VI as the best. Some people really like 10. But we cannot deny that 7 has been considered basically the messiah of the franchise. It's the god of the franchise, because it launched so many people into the JRPG genre. It was the one that was the most popular. Now, with that ever-mounting popularity, Final Fantasy VII obviously would create potential spin-off games or spin-off content. Now, here's where the part where I say that the series has fallen, or why it sucks now because of it. So, Square Enix, in its infinite wisdom, obviously would want to take advantage of this, so they would make spin-off games. I can't fault them for that. Spin-off games, spin-off content, I can't fault them for that. Mainly just because it makes sense business-wise to take advantage of that and to kind of build on that hype and that amazement that so many fans have loved, continuing to build the franchise up and maybe making new games, new stories. But it's still a problem. And the reason why it's a problem currently is because Final Fantasy VII's spin-off content has ruined the franchise. None of it is good. None of it. I dare anybody to tell me that the spin-off content from Final Fantasy VII is good. Go ahead. Convince me. Now, I will admit that some of the stuff I've never seen before, or that I've not played. I've never played Crisis Core. Some people say the game is pretty decent. However, Crisis Core is unnecessary. We do not need it. Dirge of Cerberus, a game I actually have played, sucked badly. Advent Children is a terrible movie. It's a terrible sequel to Final Fantasy in general. All of the content that has been created because Square Enix loves milking this franchise to death is not very good. And, some people will probably say, well, Crisis Core is very decent. It's like, then it's an outlier. It's one of the rare exceptions where the game is not that bad. But does it mess with the lore and the history? Yes, it does. Even though I've never played the game, I know the main antagonist of the game is touted to be stronger than Sephiroth. You know, the main antagonist for the original game? Yeah, apparently he's not the strongest character of all time in the series. He's not the badass, evil, bad dude that you gotta kill at the end. Or at least, he basically plays second fiddle to somebody else. That's bad writing. It's bad storytelling. I'm sorry, but that's just how it is. The way that Final Fantasy VII is in its current state sucks. I don't like when Square Enix makes additional content. Mainly just because when they make additional content, it is always bad. It's almost never good. I've never played any of their subsequent sequels or seen any of their subsequent extra material that is ever good. None of it is. All of it is normally bad. Or is at the very least mediocre. So, when I say that I don't like Square, and when I say I don't like how they've handled Final Fantasy VII in particular, now you can kind of see why. All of the content that they have made to try to expand the lore and the history and the characters has done very little to keep me engaged. All it's done is butchered the original story to the point where now none of it matters. Look at what they've done with the remake. Now Final Fantasy VII can be whatever the heck they want it to be. Tetsuya Nomura and his group, they do not care about continuity. They do not care about how this game functions as a story. The fact that they had to introduce something like Destiny and Fate into Final Fantasy VII Remake is incredibly ridiculous. Why do that? Why else? So that they can continue to profit off of the Final Fantasy VII faithful, or more importantly, the Final Fantasy VII fanboys who ardently defend the game and defend anything that Square does with this franchise. To kind of prove my point, let's look at what was recently announced. As I anticipated that Square would probably do at some point, DLC for Final Fantasy VII Remake. Due to the fact that we know that Part 2 is probably a few years away, probably another 5 or 6 years away, who knows, it might not even make it till the PlayStation 6 shows up on shelves. Or who knows, maybe it'll make it nearing the end of the PS5's life cycle. And then we'll have to wait for the third part during the, when PS6 rolls around. I don't know. But, let's go with that. Now, the trailer for Yuffie is relatively harmless. At least on the surface. If this was free DLC, that they were just adding extra content to your purchase, cool. Okay, fine. But I know Square better than that, and I know that they're going to charge people for it. I know this because Square is a company and they are only interested in money. They did this with Final Fantasy 15. more than once where they took advantage of the fan base and made them pay DLC for story bits and character moments and all that kind of stuff, and it's so bad. But that wasn't really where I took the biggest issue. Instead, the biggest issue is from the 2 mobile games that were announced. We have a Final Fantasy VII compilation-based game called Crisis something. You know what, quite honestly, I don't care what it's named. It's just an iOS Android game that's designed to continue the story, I guess. It's to retell all the stories, I should say. It's there to retell stories. Okay, it's there to retell the stories of Final Fantasy VII, Advent Children, Crisis Core, Dirge of Cerberus, and all the other content that has been made since the original game. Now, some people would say, oh, that's pretty cool, that's pretty fine. I, however, am incredibly skeptical of this. One, it's being released episodically, and more than likely, you will have to pay money for it. It will not be a free-to-play mobile game, it'll be one that they charge you for. And I'm not too keen on that. There's also... Oh my god, this... It made me laugh. It made me laugh and cringe at the same time that Square thinks that a good idea of their resource management is to make a Final Fantasy VII Battle Royale game. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? This is not 2017 or 2018. It's not during the boom of the Battle Royale genre. At this point, most Battle Royale games are mostly ignored or have very small player bases. The only one of note that's still maintaining a strong player base is Fortnite. And I believe the new Call of Duty's Battle Royale. They're the only ones right now that are having that are sustainable. The fact that Square thinks that they can make a Battle Royale game and make profit off of it blows my mind. As per usual, Square is late to the party. They've done this before with other trends and whatnot. They're incredibly behind the curveball. I don't know what their marketing strategists are telling them, but clearly they're looking at figures and statistics from like 3 or 4 years ago. But still, even if that wasn't the case, the fact that they're making a Battle Royale game for Final Fantasy VII is cringy enough. I'm not a huge fan of the Battle Royale genre, don't care about it all that much, and the fact that they think that this is what the fan base wants is goddamn ridiculous. Sure, some people may play it, may give it a shot. I know I won't because I have no interest in it. But this kind of just leads into just in general how I feel about Square. Square has been on a massive decline. Oh, here's a better point to make. You know, some of the people in the comments of some of my posts and some of my videos have mentioned several times that the Final Fantasy VII Remake is amazing and it's done incredibly well and it's sold really well. Did it? Well, if you look at the numbers, in the span of less than half a year, the game has sold 5 million copies. Now, when you take that into consideration of what happened to the Avengers game and the amount of money that Square lost on that endeavor, and the fact that they're even trying to fix that mess, you tell me, was this remake worth the money? Was it worth the wait? Worth the time? I'm betting not. I'm betting financially this has hurt them. Mainly just because Square is still feeling the burn and the sting of their mistakes from the previous generation. Final Fantasy XIII and also Final Fantasy XIV definitely has hurt the company in many, many ways. And also their player base, especially in Japan, has dwindled considerably in more recent years. The fact that the first part of Final Fantasy VII's remake, called Remake Integrated, really, Square, you had to rename the remake? Seriously? What the hell? But, or at least that's what it sounds like. It sounds like they're remaking the name again. But, here's what's going to, here's the thing. We know that it's going to get a re-release to the PS5. Okay. The sales for both that and the PS5 will have to come out so we get a general idea of how much money is going to be made. But from what it sounds like, the game is coming out in June of this year. And here's the kicker, though. As we are probably mostly aware, the PlayStation 5's availability, really, really bad. Like, it's not good. Very few people have the system. More people have probably a PS4 right now than people who have a PS5. That's not a good sign. Because the number of users is important. But if we take the numbers for how many what is going to be sold for both the PS4 and the PS5, maybe we'll do an update for this later when we find the numbers after a few months after that version is released. We might talk about that later, but as it stands right now, the game on just one console has sold a grand total of 5 million units. Sounds impressive enough, and it is relatively impressive and not really anything to scoff at. Now, the one thing that probably a lot of the player bases or a lot of the Final Fantasy fanboys or the Squeenix fanboys are not going to be willing to admit is one thing that's very important. The player base numbers for the PS4 are not as strong as previous generations, whether that be the PS1, the PS2, or the PS3. All of them had larger player bases than the PS4. You can look up the numbers yourselves. I've seen them myself. The numbers are much larger. Not as many people have bought a PS4 in comparison to a PlayStation 3. Now, there's many reasons for that, but the point that I'm making here is that due to that, it's very unlikely that those numbers for the Final Fantasy VII Remake are going to increase. They'll increase once the PS5 version comes out. Maybe, just a little bit. I don't know how much it's going to increase, but that depends on how many units of the PS5 is sold. I haven't looked at those numbers in particular. At least I haven't seen them yet. But the point that I'm trying to make is that game, the game on the PS4, couldn't even net half of the original sales. And we're talking about the remake, one of the most anticipated remakes of Final Fantasy. Period. One of the most demanded remakes out of any remake for any game that I've ever seen. One that has been going on for well over almost 2 decades. And its numbers do not really match in comparison to its older counterpart. Of course, granted, some people in the comments of my last video pointed out like, oh, well, the old version is on multiple platforms. I'm like, yes, and this version will be too. The numbers right now currently, due to the fact that it's only on the PS4, are not that good. And more than likely, they will probably be even worse for the PS5 because less people have a PlayStation 5 currently. Now that I'm thinking about it, I kind of want to segue into the fan base and whatnot. And I've noticed this with both of my Final Fantasy videos, which, by the way, I will leave links and info cards to both of those videos to kind of... and I want you guys that are interested to read the comments on those videos. Because, oh boy, does the fan base have a lot to say when somebody critiques or criticizes Square Enix for their bad decision making, or just criticizes Square Enix in general. Now, when I originally did my video talking about Final Fantasy XV, most people, it was mixed. There was a lot of negativity, especially when the game initially came out. But over time, that kind of shifted and changed to kind of more mixed response. There was more people actually agreeing that the game wasn't all that good or that it was incomplete. Some people still, defending it. But with 7, my last video on 7 definitely was very divisive, apparently. To have the opinion that I did not want this, I did not think that it was right for Square Enix to do the fan base dirty the way that they did, the lie that they told, to trick people into buying the game. And it was a lie. I'm sorry. Look, I'm going to just be upfront about it. I am sorry if you think that me saying that the game, that we were lied to about the remake, that we were lied to our faces, that the game was marketed and planned to be completely a retelling of the original. We were lied to. False advertising. Look up false advertising. What is false advertising? Telling someone what something is and then giving them something that it isn't. That's how I view false advertisement. And that's exactly what happened. It was marketed as a faithful recreation of the original. From head to toe. Nobody, and I do mean this, nobody who bought the game thought that it was going to be altered to the extent that it was. I was fooled, so stop lying to yourselves. I would greatly appreciate it if you guys would stop lying to yourselves. Okay? I think that it's important to just openly admit that Square had every intention of fleecing us from the get-go. Now, if you like the changes, if you like the fact that they tricked you, fine, but you're part of the problem. You're the reason why myself and many other Final Fantasy fans probably don't like Final Fantasy as much as we used to, or just outright don't like it at all. Have you guys seen the numbers of the amounts of people who have left the franchise over the years because of the crap that Square Enix pulls? You guys know the numbers. You've seen them. You tell me. How do they get away with... I mean, they get away with it. They get away with it every time. The fanboys who fervently defend this game and the player base who is willing to basically sacrifice their firstborn children to play Final Fantasy games. That is kind of a joke, but the point is that they are so diehard to defend these games even if they are bad. And I mean incredibly bad. Think about it. In the past, everybody used to give a load of crap to Final Fantasy XIII for its linearity, for its bad characters, for its bad design, its bad storytelling. But there are several people who are ardent defenders of both it and its subsequent sequels. They're out there now. There are entire channels dedicated to Final Fantasy and talking about the theories and ideas and conspiracies of Final Fantasy. And more importantly than that, they're people who ardently defend the games. Now, if you want to defend the games because you like them, that's fine. I have no issue with that. You're welcome to like those games if that's what you want to do. So long as you acknowledge that they're not perfect and that you can see the reasons why some people don't like them, then me and you have no issues. I hope that people at least watch the video to that point so that they understand that I get it. If you like the games, you like the games. And I'm not going to stop you from liking it. But you can't stop me from disliking it either. It's kind of an agree to disagree kind of scenario, which is entirely fine. If you like the games, more power to you. Just don't pretend that they're the greatest ever, because, oh boy, modern Final Fantasy games are kind of crap. Now, the original Final Fantasy games have always had their shortcomings and whatnot, but the more recent offerings of Final Fantasy have been significantly worse. But yeah, the fanbase definitely irks me. I got comments in the last Final Fantasy VII video where they were basically saying, like, basically that I need to be more respectful to the community and, accept, certain things in the community. And when I was like, I don't have to accept it. I am critical of whatever I want. Out of anybody who might give you flack for liking some of the Final Fantasy games, trust me, I am a nicer one than some others who would probably be a little bit more harsh to you for liking them. Okay? I can joke about it. I can be fine with it. I'm not overly bitter or angry if a fan likes a game. That would be stupid to me. But if you're going to be an asshole to me, in both my comment section or just in general, to defend the game, then I feel like I don't have to hold back when discussing the community of Final Fantasy. I don't feel like I have to do that. I really don't. If you're going to be a jerk to me and tell me that, and, berate me in my comment section and say that I'm wrong, even though I give fair counterpoints to the reasons why I don't like something. But you want to come to my video knowing full well that I don't like it, and then leave a comment trying to convince me otherwise. You're trying to convince somebody who is ardently saying that they don't like something that they should like something. I was told in the comments of that video that I need to go and play the game. I need to waste 40 hours of my life to play the game because it's amazing. Keep in mind that I pointed out to the people that it was full of filler, full of things that were unneeded and drastically changed this story. Doesn't matter. Game's amazing. 10 out of 10. Would marry if it was my waifu. That was what you guys said in the comments. Or at least that's what some of them said in the comments. Constantly telling me, it's a 40-hour game and we feel sorry for you that you don't love this game. Are you for real? Are you serious? I've enjoyed Final Fantasy for a long time, although less so now than I was when I was a kid. But you're going to tell me that I'm sad and pathetic because I would much rather play better JRPGs. That I would like to have a more refined taste and actually have really good storytelling and good characters. I'm the pathetic one? I'm not the one paying Square Enix hundreds of dollars for special editions. I'm not the one buying every single Square Enix game and saying, it's amazing, groundbreaking work, when in reality, it is the most mediocre franchise I have seen in years. It is overhyped. They do not deserve the credentials they currently have. That much is obvious to me. They have not reclaimed their glory days. That's for sure. Think about it. Every single subsequent game of Final Fantasy has been disappointing in one form or another. The only game currently in Square Enix's repertoire of games that has been consistent and has still been good, even though I myself don't play them all that much, is Dragon Quest. That's it. Look at the current Dragon Quest game. Did they change a whole lot about the game that would probably turn off a good portion of the fan base? No. They keep that game consistent. Square, when it comes to Final Fantasy, when it comes to Kingdom Hearts, when it comes to any of their other IPs, they feel they need to tweak and change it so that it fits what they want. More so than what the fan base wants. The fan base itself is more focused on the characters and not the story. Now, characters are fine. Don't get me wrong. I love characters. Characters are one of my favorite things about JRPGs in general. And several of the Final Fantasy characters are really good characters. Highly serviceable characters and ones that I enjoy. However, the point I'm trying to make here is that the emphasis on the characters is so deeply ingrained to the point where it doesn't make sense. Story be damned. Content be damned. It doesn't matter to a lot of these fans. All they want are the characters. Because the characters look cool. And that's all they care about. It's like the 90s of comic books all over again. Just though the characters look cool, that's all that matters. They don't have to have substance or depth or tell good stories. No. Stories that affect the characters and whatnot. No, we don't need that crap. We just need the characters to look cool and asymmetrical. That'll sell the fan base. And that's the truth of the matter, to me. That's how I feel about it. They care more about that as a fan base, as a community, than the actual storytelling itself. Because, as I said, when it comes to the Final Fantasy VII Remake, not a single one of the people who are in the comment section could defend the game to the point where it would be a reasonable defense. Not one of them, not a single one of them, could defend the game in a way that convinced me to maybe look at a different point of view. They said it was a sequel. It wasn't advertised as a sequel, it was advertised as a remake of the original. Doesn't matter. It's a sequel. You should be happy that they're making a sequel of Final Fantasy VII. The last time someone tried to make a sequel to Final Fantasy VII, it was garbage. Oh, and look, it's Tetsuya Nomura who's in charge of both those projects. What a shock. I know I'm sounding a little bit harsh here, but I think it's just a lot of stuff that I needed to get off my chest that was bothering me about Final Fantasy VII, and I intended on doing a video talking about Square Enix and the reasons why I wasn't happy with the company and why I feel like they don't deserve as much credit as they do, but this news for Final Fantasy VII pretty much just cinched it for me that I don't need to do that video right now. All I need to do is talk about this and the reason why the marketing, the strategy that is involved with Final Fantasy VII has not only made that franchise suck, but Square will take any opportunity to take advantage of those fans. And because they're such diehard fans, most of which do not want to consider the possibility that, hey, maybe some of the things that Square does is some stuff that you should be upset about, they'd rather defend the game. They'd rather, continue to buy the merch, buy the games, which, hey, it's your money, your choice. You are free to do with it as you wish. I do what I do with my money. You do you with what you want to do with your money. Totally fine. I get it. I understand. Yeah, I guess in a sense it does surprise me that the fan base is currently at the point where it's at right now. I'm not saying that every single fan of Final Fantasy is like that. Obviously that's not true, but there is a pretty sizable contingency of them who love these games to the point where they feel they need to defend them like it's their girlfriend. And of course that kind of annoys and bothers me, because normally when I play a game and I find that I don't like it, I normally am vocal and I want to talk about the reasons why I don't enjoy it, why I don't enjoy the story, or anything of that nature. But, for some reason, when I call out Square, nope, these fans have to come out of the woodwork to defend it. Okay. I guess I have to kind of accept that right now. But I guess the part where they're saying like, oh, you must lead a very sad and pathetic life of the fact that I need a multi-billion-dollar company for me to find joy and whatnot. I'm like, that's kind of what it sounds like. It sounds like I need Square in my life. I need them. I need their game in order to feel fulfilled as a human being. That's what it kind of sounds like, and it sounds pathetic. Games are a hobby. In some cases, yes, video games can be your life, whether you're a game developer or a content creator, sure. But there are other things out there. Video games are supposed to be a hobby, a form of entertainment. You don't need the company to... If you miss out on a game, because you're not interested in it or because you don't like it, doesn't mean that, that your life is now hollow because you no longer, because you don't want to play that game. That's not how it works. I mean, I understand the concept of like the kind of like the missing out kind of thing. I can understand that, but to say like my life must be sad and empty. Now, excuse me while I play The Legend of Heroes for over 100+ hours. Yeah, because like they were talking like, oh, that's 40+ hours of content. Yeah, that's funny. I played The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel. I logged in 80 hours into that game. And I loved every moment of it. I'm looking at my computer right now and I see a bunch of games on here. Other JRPG franchises that I will have probably more fun with than what Final Fantasy currently offers. I think that it's important, if you're a fan of something, in particular if you're a fan of JRPGs, I think it's important to not be limited to one company. You know, I think it's important. I think it's very critical and important to branch out and play other games. Because once you do that, you realize that not only is Square Enix not the only game in town, you also realize that Square Enix's games are very pedestrian. They're easy to play. It's not a lot of challenge in a lot of those games. Some are more challenging than others, but for the most part, Square makes Final Fantasy games for newcomers. Most of them are not overtly challenging. Their game mechanics are very pedestrian and are easy to learn. But when you compare it to something like, I don't know, Persona or The Legend of Heroes or anything that Falcom, any of the Falcom games that Falcom makes, you know, those games, or just the fact that from a very young age, I branched out and tried other games from other genres in JRPGs. And I think I've been better for it. My knowledge of the genre and my overall enjoyment of the genre has only improved. It's only gotten better. That's just my personal take. I think like, hey, I like Fire Emblem. I like playing Fire Emblem games. The Tales of games are normally a very fun and enjoyable game to play. The Persona games are written incredibly well. The Legend of Heroes, the Trails of Cold Steel has been pretty much my absolutely favorite thing to gush over in recent years. Wild Arms was a franchise that I learned about when I was younger, when I was a teenager, right a year or so after I learned about Final Fantasy VII. Same thing for Star Ocean. I learned about that after that. I branched out, and when I started to realize that Square was not producing the games that I wanted, I was kind of in this weird place. You know, I was kind of in a weird place where I wasn't really sure what to do. Because I wasn't getting the games that I wanted. But now, ever since I learned about, in particular, once I learned about The Legend of Heroes, and especially Trails of Cold Steel, and I found the copies of the game used, of both 1 and 2, and I played them, especially due to the pandemic and the fact that I have a lot of free time on my hands, and I actually played the games, or at least I've played through all of 1 and I'm playing through 2 currently. This was what I was missing. I was missing good gameplay, good storytelling, good characters. Oh my god. I know I'm gushing about that, and I need to save that for another video, but my point is that, and also, like, I had never played a Persona game before, really. I bought Persona 3 a few years ago, but I never really popped it in. I played it for a little bit. I've played mostly Persona 5, and the storytelling, the characters, and the way that the gameplay works and whatnot, it's really good. While the Final Fantasy fanbase continues to play the same generic and uninteresting games, and it boggles my mind, I guess, in a sense. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm gonna leave this video relatively simple. I'm not going to put a whole lot of images or anything up. Probably, basically consider this kind of like a podcast. You could turn it on in the background and listen to it. Considering I've gone for an incredible length of time discussing this. Far more so probably than I intended. So, I know that, what was it? One of my mods recommended me to call a new segment on my channel the Nightcast. So, congratulations! It's the inaugural episode of the Nightcast, I guess. Might as well at this point, because we're almost going at an hour. Or we're closing in on an hour. It probably won't be an hour, because I'm going to edit it down, but yeah. The introduction of the Nightcast. Welcome to the Nightcast. We might do more of these in the future. Maybe we'll have co-hosts at some point. But until then, please, as always, if you enjoy my content, please, as always, do not forget to leave me a like. Shoot me a comment. Subscribe if you're new. I'd greatly appreciate any and all support. And of course, as always, do not forget to raise your nerd flags high, and I will see you next time. Nightwolf is out.